So today we have incredible speakers for you. We're very thrilled to host both of them. Our first speaker is Dr. Ebenezer Obadari. We're excited to host him all the way from the University of Kansas. So despite our rivalry, be nice, everybody. Dr. Obadari receives his PhD from the London School of Economics. He is currently a professor of sociology. He's a civil society scholar with particular interest in informal strategies of resistance under changing dynamics of rules, including civil society, public sphere, social change, and developing in Africa, as well as transnational migration and cooperative society. And we thought it was an apropos collaboration research topic for the presentation today. So he has researched and published extensively on religion and politics, civic engagement, civic service, and citizenship in Africa. And today, Jennifer and I got a chance to receive a copy of his book as well. But he's the author and editor of 7 books, including Humor, Silence in Civil Society Nigeria, Governance and the Crisis of Rule in Contemporary Africa, Leadership and Transformation, The Handbook of Civil Society in Africa, Civic Agency in Africa, Arts of Resistance in the 21st Century. So today for his presentation, he's going to talk to us about some aspects of his ongoing research, Pentecostal pastors, power and politics in Africa. His presentation is titled Men of Letters to Men of God, Pastors, Politics, Changing Forms of Authority in Africa. So please give me a warm welcome.
Thanks for the kind introduction. I've been warned that I have only 20 minutes, so I'm going to try and limit myself to 20 minutes. So what I'd like to share with you this afternoon is the broad outline of the book manuscript I'm currently working on. The book manuscript is the second installment of a planned trilogy on the dynamic interaction of faith and politics in the Nigerian Fourth Republic. And the manuscript extends the analysis undertaken in my recently published book, Pentecostal Republic, Religion and the Struggle for State Power in Nigeria. So while Pentecostal Republic traces the process through which Christian Pentecostalism became the dominant expression of Christianity in the country, and over the course of the Nigerian Fourth Republic, cemented the apparent triumph of political Christianity over its historic competition, Islam. The manuscript I'm currently working on situates the figure of the Pentecostal pastor at the center of ongoing transformations in the forms and character of authority in Nigeria, and most certainly a large number of African countries. This transformation, an apparent change of baton from one form of authority to another, is what the title of my presentation today seeks to capture. Now, no one pays even the most fleeting attention to the socioeconomic and political milieu in Africa today can fail to notice the ubiquity of the Pentecostal pastor. In the morning, you read reports of him resurrecting a member of his congregation. During a normal afternoon, he casually picks the winner of a closely contested presidential election. And then he caps his day with a confident pronouncement on the trajectory of the financial markets. So far from being a mere authority on spiritual matters, therefore, today's Pentecostal pastor is what I call a widely sought after existential micromanager. He's a blend of spiritual guide, financial coach, marriage counselor, fashion icon, travel advisor, all-purpose celebrity. And last but not least, is a hyper-masculine object of erotic fascination. So the question is how to explain this singular, ubiquitous, and, if you will, multitasking agent. How do we account for his, and the emphasis is mostly he, because most of the pastors you have studied are male, but there are female pastors too. But the most influential ones are the young, and I can answer questions about that. As do we account for his growing influence in African states under various forms of pressure? And how do we leverage such an account for a deeper understanding of the crisis of authority in contemporary Africa? With Nigeria as the immediate locus of my analysis, my basic premise is that as post-colonial secular modernity chokes on its founding promises And as the state loses its empirical solidity and becomes more of an abstraction in people's everyday lives, Pentecostal pastors are, for all practical purposes, emerge as substitute authorities, consultants who are entrusted with the final word on a range of subjects, from the pietistic to the private. The story of how the post-colonial state in Africa found itself in its current impasse is too complex and certainly too nuanced to be properly described within the scope of my talk today. Instead, what I should like to emphasize is that the current situation, which has seen pastors emerge as substitute authorities, has serious ramifications for how we understand citizenship in African states, majority of which, as it happens, are still struggling to lay a solid foundation for representative democracy. So across a variety of sociological contexts, ranging from post-industrial democracies, so think about contemporary United States, through consolidated military oligarchies and societies under the curse of dictatorships of various kinds, accounts of religious politics have exposed the role of the clerisy in the political process, specifically in the most disturbing examples in engineering civic consent. With one eye on this literature, I wish to situate the newfound visibility of African charismatic pastors within the void created by the following three factors. And these are the three factors I would like to cover over the next 15 minutes or so. The first one is the retreat of the state, a process that is far more complicated and certainly more nuanced than the impression given in most conventional accounts. The second factor is the decline of traditional pillars of authority, the intelligentsia located in universities and other institutions of higher learning. And then the third factor is the popular quest for stability, which has been elicited by constant disruptions in the global capitalist economy. And I'm suggesting that it's a concourse of these three factors that you need to take into consideration in accounting for the emergence of this new fabulous agent, the Pentecostal pastor. Now, I'm going to address these three factors in quick succession. My first claim is that the emergence and social power of Pentecostal pastors is in part attributable to the post-colonial African states' gradual abandonment of its statutory responsibilities. As I mentioned before, this is a very messy process with various twists and turns. However, there seems to be a general agreement among students of African politics that the pivotal moment in this process was the era of structural adjustment in the mid to late 1980s. Foreshadowing the generalized precarity of the first decade of the 21st century, structural adjustment caused immeasurable social despair, strained relations between state and society, and shredded lingering hopes of constructing a socially sensitive state. In retrospect, it marked the inception of a mass embrace of popular religiosity, which also laid the foundation for the emergence of the Pentecostal pastor as a totalizing agent, one whose word is quite often, and oftentimes quite literally, law. Second, the grip of Pentecostal pastors on the social imagination gains special illumination when set against the backdrop of the arguable decline of the authority of knowledge producers, like members of the intelligentsia traditionally located in the academy and policy think tanks. Until the 1980s at least, many African countries boasted a tertiary education system that was widely accepted as competitive with the best in the world. However, and for reasons not unrelated to my previous point, the situation began to change in the late 1980s. Since then, what began as a trickle of academic exiles to the West, or indeed anywhere in the world, with a modicum of infrastructure to support intellectual production, has become a veritable flood, leading to today's situation in which thousands of African academics, I'm guilty, ply their wares in a wide range of colleges and universities abroad, mostly North Africa and Europe. And these days, parents fear that they may be selling their words short if they do not send them to get a university abroad, by any means necessary. I should emphasize again that what I've described as the decline of the authority of knowledge producers is by no means unique to African countries, but must be seen, and if you live in the United States, you know what I'm talking about, as part and parcel of the global diminishment of the expert. A process partly enabled, partly exacerbated by widespread access to the internet. Among other things, this process whereby every citizen is automatically an authority to himself or herself has led to a change in the balance of power between leaders and followers. But what you may wonder, does this have to do with Pentecostal pastors? So here in the capsule is my explanation. So for a long time, African academics and intellectuals saw themselves as defenders of the public good, in which capacity they defined and contributed to public debates, built bridges with popular organizations like trade unions, resisted military and other forms of dictatorial rule, and held the state by and large accountable. The preeminent example of this is, the Nigerian, academic staff union of universities, ASU. In short, university academics were a crucial cog in the emergent post-colonial public sphere. All of which means that as a body of scholars who traded in the currency of ideas, they won and held the trust of the general public, which took the authority for granted. It stands to reason, therefore, that their evacuation will leave a void, both intellectual and social, in the public space. Therefore, Pentecostal pastors, some of whom incidentally used to be university professors, are, I suggest, indirect beneficiaries of the crisis of higher education and the decline of the intellectual class. Hence, it is not in pastors. The conclusion is the same for both cases. Clerical speech has become authoritative, intellectual speech, not so much. Third, and perhaps in a process that speaks to their capacity to generate narratives that buffer their own claims to social distinction, Pentecostal pastors, I suggest, have profited from mass anxiety produced by deepening economic uncertainty. They do so not only by attributing Africa's economic crisis to a variety of spiritual perversions. So, an instance is, the whole debate over, homosexuality and gay rights in Africa. But almost invariably, they position themselves as the only agents with the spiritual wherewithal to provide the solution. In this manner, pastors garner a measure of public valorization as agents uniquely positioned to balance the secular and the theological. So members of the audience, who are students of sociology, will immediately recognize here a broad consistency with the sociological literature on narratives. Narratives are ways of establishing mutual understanding with members of the collective, of the collectivity to which we belong. A crucial means for social recognition. Narratives provide the narrator with means and ways to organize reality and construct meanings. For their part, not only do pastors, through such narratives, provide an interpretive schema in helping people make sense of events, and this is the crucial point, pastors also impose their own version of events in a way that returns to them by bolstering their social power, thus validating political scientist Murray Edelman's argument that the language that constructs a problem and provides an origin for it is also a rationale for vesting authority in people who claim some kind of competence. This centrality of pastors carries important implications. For instance, it translates into today's situation in which, as I said at the beginning, the pastor has become a widely sought after existential micromanager. So among the people I've worked with in my research, effective references to reverential invocations of and vigorous defenses of man of God, my pastor, my daddy, and in the case of the pastor's wife, my mommy, are constant reminders of the power of the close, sometimes a bit too close relationship that many congregants have with their pastors. In the same vein, the gifts and donations that they give to the same pastors are reminders of the extent to which many will go to express their heartfelt affection. In many churches, the occasion of the pastor or the pastor's wife's birthday is usually the occasion for ostentatious generosity. But in truth, many congregants can hardly wait. And there is now a real sense in which congregations struggle to outdo one another in regards to the size, monetary worth, and distinctiveness of their gifts to their beloved pastors. So why should a student of African politics and society share my concern about the growing influence of Pentecostal pastors? In Africa, nascent democratic institutions are fragile and susceptible to manipulation. At the same time, Africans' widespread assumption that real power is ultimately spiritual makes it imperative to raise questions about the political impact of religious leaders who are charismatic, fabulously rich, and increasingly inserted in a variety of transnational networks. As a social cohort, these pastors point to gaps in the authority structure of African countries. They continue to exert an influence on political praxis, not only by guiding the political taste, but often determining the political mood by defining what should count as political. In this way, they add a fascinating dimension and depth to discussions on the quality of liberal democracy and governance in transitional African societies. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
That was very good.
Yeah.
We'd like to take some questions from the audience. And while you think about your question, it just reminded me of my own experience in Rwanda. We had a pastor who slowly grew his church. And the last time I went, I remember sitting in the back with my friend, and the first lady walked up in the church. I was like, oh, our church, yes, our church. The first lady comes, so you're all right. They bless babies and baptize babies in the morning, and by the afternoon, they're political power.
Multitasking agents.
They are, yes. Who has a question? Go ahead, Tunde.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. It's very. I can easily connect with a lot of things that you talked about in your book. And my first point is actually an observation from the word that you use. You use Africa a lot. Personally, I have experience with Nigerian politics and pastors and religion, and I've seen a lot of similar things come from South African media, but I don't know about other part of Africa. So is this something that we can generalize with the other countries in Africa? I don't know.
I think easily.
Professor,
Nigeria is the capital of charismatic Pentecostalism in Africa. I say that not because I'm Nigerian, of course, but most of the forms and most of the dimensions and all the things you find, being, done in the name of Pentecostalism in other African countries. There's a sense in which you can trace some of them back to Nigeria. Okay. One, through, Nollywood. Two, through, the footprint of Nigerian immigrants who are, basically in every other part of Africa, right? But if you look at all the places where, Pentecostalism is, has an ebullient presence, you can think of any number of, just 6 or 7 countries. Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Uganda, right? These are critical, these are major African countries. So I don't think you overreach when you generalize. All the patterns I've spoken about, some of my examples, are drawn from, from Nigeria, but some of if you see some of the pictures, they're from other parts, things happening in other parts of Africa. So this is perfectly generalized.
Okay, thank you. The other 3 now are actually critiques of some of the things that you read about. The first is that when we talk about these Pentecostal religion, I think a lot of them actually copied or they learned from American Pentecostal pastors. And so we cannot overlook that. Like we have a couple of American Pentecostal pastors that are actually also very flamboyant, in their lifestyle and try to, but maybe not a lot into politics, but at least some other things that you talked about.
So what you are saying is right, but I think it's more helpful analytically to think about what you might call a transnational economy, an economy in which forms, languages, idioms are circulating. You find American pastors coming to Africa, and you find African pastors going to Africa. Sometimes you don't know where the actual origin of a particular thing starts. So I see there are so many instances in which you can say, oh yeah, I think this is they're getting this from the United States. So I think about the manner of speaking in many of those churches, for instance, right? You don't just say Jesus, you say Jesus. There's something very African American, creflo-dollar, about that. But don't also forget that we live in a world of images that are constantly circulating. And the United States, American pastors are also taking on, elements of African Pentecostalism.
Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, another question, another point.
Fine,
one more thing, please. Another thing I just feel that you should talk about, or maybe it's another part of the book, is the culture, the tradition, the culture of the people back at home. I don't know the right word to use, because as Nigerian, we, Christianity or not, they are very religious people, right? Even when they worship their traditional, like in those days. And those traditional leaders have always been resulting to be political leaders. So when you talk about Obatala, you talk about Oduduwa, all those Orishas, they are religious gods and leaders that people worship that end up being their rulers. And so I think there is this culture of worshipping and looking up to those spiritual leaders that actually over time, maybe in the now build up into the 60s or 70s and 80s when Pentecostal Christianity comes to Nigeria, and then people, and that actually take over. So I think that culture also have to be referenced into how this all built up.
So there's a paper of mine that I think you should read. It's about prayer and the rise of charismatic Islam. And it's about, one, the mutual appropriation that takes place between Christianity and Islam in Nigeria. But the central point there is also about how, at the end of the day, both draw on, the metaphysical scaffolding of traditional religion. That at the end of the day, if you want to understand Christianity or Islam in any part of Africa, the first thing you have to study, is traditional religion. It provides the foundation, for whatever you find in those other two faiths. Did I answer the question?
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please sit down, sir. No, please. No, please sit down.
I'm a preacher. I'm used to It's very ironical, but my fields are 6 or so.
Oh.
I happen to be a traditional pastor of the United Methodist Church in Zimbabwe, and even here. Yes. I think we need to be very careful to generalize. I got so mad, I used to get so mad when I was in Zimbabwe to hear that a heading, I happen to be a journalist too, a heading on a newspaper, influential newspaper, saying a pastor rapes 9-year-old or something like that. We have to make a distinction between the 2-day pastors who have their theology under a tree, and then they wake up there with under the charismatic rage and go to preach. It's not the pastor with a capital P for the traditional church. He doesn't go around doing that. So we have to make that distinction that these with all due respect, Pentecostal reach outs are spoiling the name for everybody. So we have to make that functional distinction between the pastor with a capital P for the traditional church and these mushrooming situational churches that are coming up.
Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to make that remark.
Do you want me to respond to that? Or if it pertains to that, do you want to call me or should I respond?
You can respond.
Okay. Two quick responses to that. Thank you for your question, sir. For your comment. The first point is that as sociologists, we can't but generalize, right? And the fact that you find an exception to a generalization does not necessarily disqualify the generalization, right? So when the Bible says, for instance, that the soul of man is wicked, right? It doesn't mean you will not find human beings that are not wicked. It just means that their assertion applies to most of humanity.
Yeah, I get it.
It's a comment on human nature. So that's the first point about generalization. But the second one is that for a student of African Christianity, for what I do, the commentary on real pastors versus fake pastors is material for me. My job as a sociologist is not to rule on what is real and fake. It is to study discourses, to study ideas, to think about what people do when they say something is fake, and to think about what they do when they say something is real. I'm not a judge, I'm just an observer.
If I may follow that, I'm not saying you are a judge. What I'm saying is the common person must be made to understand that they should not generalize and think everybody is like that. Because the tendency now with the ecclesiastical platform is to have people think that a pastor with a small p is everybody.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
Yes.
We have to make the distinction, because with all due respect to the American missionaries who came with the church from Britain or from here, I have very high respect for them, because some of those who were enlightened picked up the traditional religious aspects which are relevant to Christianity. And that is why we have the strength of the church shifting from America to Africa.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, my question is also feeding on to what the Mr. Pastor is just saying. He's from Zimbabwe, I'm also from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
So, are there any studies that are being done to, because for me it's more, I think, as I'm a Christian, as a Christian, we are at a point where we need to intervene. Just like he's saying that, I mean, we need to educate that there is a small P and there is a big P. Because I think we need to have studies, and my question is, are there any studies that are being done around surveying most of these congregants who are going in big numbers to these churches, so that we understand what, I mean, I know it's belief, I know they think it's true, and we are not here to judge, but are there studies that are being done so that we get to a point where we can start to intervene and help people?
Okay. This is the time for me to plug my book. Seriously, you should read my book which just came out. So it's about Nigeria, but it draws on examples from other parts of Africa, and it's the first installment of a trilogy, as I said at the beginning. The one I'm working on now, which will come out late next year, will have study. We'll talk about one of the things that you've spoken about. Again, I want to repeat this. As a sociologist, I don't want to rule over what big P does to the small p. I want to study two P's and understand both. So maybe it is the work of a theologian to say, according to some doctrinal precepts, this is right, this is wrong, but I will be overreaching if I were to do that as a sociologist.
And I think, just speaking as a person too, I do want to know the distinction between a capital P and a P. As I sit there and I give you my money, which buys your car and your house and the other thing, right? As opposed to I give you my money and we build houses or shelter. So that, as just a person who's not a scholar, I can see how that's very important too. Yes, one question.
Final one.
Western Nigeria actually contradicts that. Western Nigeria is almost like Eritrea, 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. It's what I call a very competitive religious marketplace, where there's a very intense struggle for souls. And what has happened over the last 20 years is that as Christians have become very successful, Muslims have started adopting many of the repertoires and strategies, evangelistic strategies of Christians. What do? Now they also they do the Salatu on Sunday. I've attended with them, I've studied it, I've written about it. They do night vigils, right? If you go to an Islamic night vigil, if you were an observer from Mars and nobody told you that this is a Muslim group, you just think it's a regular, Pentecostal group. So it's interesting how that competition itself, produces very new forms of performances, that a sociologist, it's like you revel in it, just looking at it like, oh, I love it. So.
Very good, thank you. Professor Brian Fenwick, he's Deputy Research, Dean of Research and Faculty of Community Health at the University of Western Cape in South Africa. He's a social psychologist with a passion for research methods. So, he trained in health systems research at the South African Medical Research Council, and his current interests are in human resource management in health, social behavioral aspects of health, and HIV/AIDS, and community-based interventions. He is currently visiting our campus through a partnership Mizu had with the University of the Western Cape. Our campuses have a faculty exchange program, and he's currently working with Dr. Michelle Toti. So the overall purpose of of their work is to improve the well-being of vulnerable groups of South African. Particularly, they're looking at adolescents ages 15-19 who are struggling to effectively transition to adults in adult HIV care. So they applied for funding, and Dr. Teti traveled to Cape Town, and now he's here to complete part of that project. So for her trip, she wanted to further establish a research partnership, review what he had done. So his existing study on adolescents and HIV treatment, and of course start collecting pilot data observation. And then they're going to also develop NIH proposal to continue the work to better understand and support the needs of adolescents with HIV in South Africa as well. So today he's going to talk to us about their collaboration, how we came to be, delve into the work they did while Dr. Teti was in Cape Town, what they're now doing during his current trip at Mizzou. This is day 2 of this really long trip, and then of course finally their future plans. Please welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian van Wyk. Thanks for the introduction. So it's a bit of a whirlwind coming into it, so I'm still getting over the time differences. So sorry I don't have a PowerPoint presentation yet. So maybe just to give you a short background about myself. So I'm associate professor at the University of the Western Cape. For those who don't know, don't confuse it with the University of Cape Town. It's a university at the foot of the mountain, and we're the university closest to the airport. And so don't pass us by when you go to the other two. And I'm in the School of Public Health. I'm a health systems researcher, but particularly my focus is around HIV/AIDS. And currently, my background is as a behavioral scientist. I studied psychology, and my particular interest is around health behaviors. Of those of patients, but also of professionals. So I'm working in health systems research, looking at the intersection between community and the services, and how one can kind of work with both parties, but also looking at that interface between the two. So I've been working in the area of HIV and adherence for the past 10 years. And so as all of you know, South Africa has a massive burden of HIV. Currently, it's almost 10% of South Africans is HIV has been diagnosed as HIV positive. So that means we're talking about close to 6 million people in South Africa, and of particular interest. So that makes if you're looking at in terms of sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa is a big contributor of the epidemic in sub-Saharan Africa. So South Africa has done great strides in terms of HIV, rolling out antiretroviral treatment, which is the preferred mode of treating HIV. And so currently we kind of reaching 2.5 million people on ART, and it's increasing rapidly. Also, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is the new policy regarding HIV treatment is as soon as somebody tests HIV positive, they initiate it on treatment immediately. Okay, so there's an aggressive program currently in South Africa to enroll people on treatment. I'm not so sure how familiar, I should give some background on HIV treatment, but maybe just in short, HIV treatment, you don't get cured. Right. You're in treatment for life, so it's a chronic condition. So as simple as that is to understand, for people that are HIV positive, it's actually not easy to understand that you're taking these pills, but you're not really getting cured. Okay? So you're kind of just managing your chronic condition. You know, so that's quite hard for people to see. Whereas initially, at the start of the HIV epidemic, people were close to dying, and antiretroviral treatment was the Lazarus effect. People that were dead and dying, or dying and literally wasting away, suddenly got put onto this treatment, and suddenly they pick up weight, they got energy, you know, they become productive again, you know, and they refer to that as the Lazarus effect. And that was a big contributor why adherence initially was very good. See the dramatic effect of somebody that was literally a walking dead towards now thriving and prospering on treatment. But now that you are healthy, why should you be reminded still that you are sick? So why do you now have to keep on taking this treatment daily that reminds you of your diseased state? You know, why can't you now live like a healthy person? Yeah. So that is the biggest challenge around adherence. And so as I said, I've been working on adherence since 2006, over more than 10 years. And what we found is of particular interest that we became aware of globally is that adolescents. Previously, what happened was that with treatment not being readily available, most children who are born with HIV do not survive into adolescence. But currently, because of advances in treatment, they are now surviving, and what we currently have is this generation that are actually surviving 10 years, 12 years into living with HIV and surviving into adolescence. So now, if you just think about puberty, all those storms, and periods and transitions, hormonal changes, physiological changes, psychological challenges that they're having, you know, they want to have a girlfriend, boyfriend, all that type of thing, and they're living with HIV. And that's particularly our challenge category. So in South Africa, it's about 6% of people living with HIV/AIDS are adolescents, so between 10 and 19 years old. And so it's critical that we look at this proportion of people living with HIV. Why? Because they're going to increase. Okay. Currently, they're kind of hidden away because when we do reporting for HIV and how people are doing on treatment, they are masked away as children or as adolescents, or as adults. That in between period that I'm neither a child anymore, but I'm not adult still. So that 10 to 19-year-old period is kind of invisible and is not picked up when we do routine reporting of that. So what happened was, for the past couple of years, nobody really knew how well adolescents were really doing on treatment. Okay, so for instance, we did a study in the Western Cape metropole, where I'm staying in, that's Cape Town, the biggest city of Cape Town. And we just did a retrospective cohort study on viral load suppression. So viral load suppression means that the amount of HIV virus in the body has been lowered to the point of being undetectable. So in other words, they're living healthy, they look good. The chances of opportunistic infections are less. Life can happen for them. Okay, so that's the ideal state. All right. We've done a quick study and just looking at 2-year outcomes. And at 4 months, we found in our study 60% had viral suppression. It dropped to 40% after 1 year, and dropped to 25% at 24 months, 2 years. So that means a quarter of the people are actually continuing, actually thriving on treatment after 2 years of treatment. So that's an extreme worry. What does it mean? Well, they're not symptomatic yet, but they are going to be picking up. They are going to become increasingly sick. The viral load is going to rebound. It's going to increase. So that means their vulnerability for sickness is going to increase. And we kind of looked at how many of those people are retained in care also over the period. And the quick numbers that I could report is 69% at 4 months. Then it dropped to half at 12 months. And then at 24 months, we have 36% of people. You know, 36% people. It could also mean that many of them, because they are well, now they are becoming mobile. They're looking for jobs. They're looking for employment. They're going elsewhere. You know, so mobility for economic reasons or for employment is also a big factor. So what these findings is showing us is that if we are able to retain them in care, and then we did a separate analysis for that, and we found that for those that are retained in care, the viral suppression at 4 months is 87%, at 12 months is 79%, and at 2 years of initiating treatment is 69%. So in other words, the key factor should be to get them to do well in treatment, which is just retain them in care. In other words, keep them engaged in care for longer periods. Okay, so this is small background. So how did I come about being here in Missouri, traveling 18 hours, you know, through various time zones? So Michelle Titi, my collaborator here at UWC, so some of you may know they tend to take students from here, from Missouri, taking them over to University of Western Cape, particularly Cape Town, expose them to kind of conditions that we are there. Okay, so Cape Town is a bit of a hybrid city. You have the one side of it that looks posh, almost like a European city. You know, everything's very nice, and you have your coffee, you know, you think you're in Italy or some posh place and so on. But then you also have this 90% of the outside of Cape Town, which is actually poor. And so that means if you're looking at the disease profiles, those people are severely, are as bad as you can find anywhere else. So what we find also with HIV, the challenges in Cape Town is also quite stark between the rich and the poor. And particularly when we're looking at the HIV prevalence of the Western Cape as a province, it would look low, but if you're looking at certain pockets, you'd find that there's hotspots of high HIV prevalence that are exceeding 10%, which is up to 12 to 15%, which is higher than the national prevalence. So when Michelle was there, came to visit us, she kind of did a small presentation about photo voice. I don't know how many know about photo voice as a study designer. Okay, I don't have to say anything. All right. So basically, show us a picture like you did very well. I should have actually shown you a couple of pictures, but okay, sorry about that. Just blame it on the jet lag. So what we found with photo voice is actually quite a nice way to engage adolescents. You know, so what we wanted to know is what are the challenges that adolescents are seeing, you know, in dealing with the treatment. What are the challenges with living with HIV? What are the challenges with going to school, interacting with family? Some of them have parents that have died of HIV. So in other words, they're living either in an extended family or in a foster family. So what are the challenges that they're sitting with? And we found that, so when Michelle came and kind of presented some of the photo voice studies that she's done, I kind of sat there starry-eyed and thought, oh, that will work for my study. So obviously, and that's when the collaboration started, you know, and obviously, and so I spoke to her about it, you know, spoke about my idea, you know, about doing a study on finding out what are the challenges that adolescents that are on treatment and living with HIV. So that's where that collaboration started. And so to date, as we already mentioned, we've got funding for some formative work, which included the retrospective cohort analysis of treatment outcomes for the past 2 years, the photo voice study, and also a descriptive study on health service delivery and innovations in programs for adolescents living with HIV and heart. So the progress to date was we finished the cohort study. We are busy writing that out. Some manuscripts are done there. What we tend to do with the collaboration is we involve input masters and public health students. So we use sections of the research project, you know, for them to do. And then currently what we are busy with is we are piloting, we've finished the pilot data collection for the photo voice study. My purpose of my visit is we are looking at the data, looking at analysis for that. So a big component of this collaboration between Missouri University and University of Western Cape is for research capacity development. So I'm here to learn about how to do photo voice data analysis. I think I'm quite okay with doing qualitative research generally. I've got a few years of experience. But photo voice is something new, so we will be kind of sitting here together, she'll be training, we'll be going through the current set of data, analyze that, I go back, train my research assistants, and do that. And as already mentioned, I think I sufficiently enticed Michelle to kind of come for a longer period, so we're also going to be putting together a full-blood application for her to spend some longer time in Cape Town. How many of you have been to Cape Town? Fantastic city, right? So you're very welcome. So yeah, so Michelle also thought so. So we're putting together a proposal in that respect so that she can spend more extended time in that. So one of the things that we are looking at, and then also we will be working on a joint grant NIH grant, looking particularly at the dimensions. So what I didn't mention is, I didn't go into detail about the findings of our cohort study, but two things came out quite clearly from that. One is transitioning from pediatric care to adult care in the HIV program is problematic. Why? Because as a child, you are being protected, you're being babied, you know, you're being mothered, fathered, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and you're kind of special because it's not your fault. Now that you're an adult and you're living with HIV, it's like, what did you do? Yeah? Oh, interesting, playing around. It's all your fault. So suddenly they move from being pampered and treated well towards you're independent. What you got here is because of your doing. Yeah? And the majority of the patients, of the participants in our study were infected from childhood, you know, as infants, you know, from mother to child. So nothing to do with them, but being grouped together in adult care, that is kind of the mindset that they have been faced with. So we find that age group 15 to 17 is critical for dropping out of care. So we're trying to, so one of the things that we've done is, in the US, there's been studies around transition for autism spectrum disorders and other chronic conditions, you know, about successfully transitioning them. The big problem is with those kind of rare diseases, small scale programs, so you can be quite specific in terms of transition protocols. In South African context, it's done at scale. And you need to have transition protocols in place, pre-transition and post-transition, and in between, that actually takes care of that. So that means that the psychosocial support that is being provided to adolescents during that transition period becomes critical. Okay? So it's kind of looking at the hormonal changes, looking at school changes, looking at all those environments, and actually saying, how can we support them psychosocially to help with that transition period? So the grant that we're going to be looking at is looking at all these kinds of proof of concept about guided transition with psychosocial support for adolescents as they move from pediatric care into adult care.
Do we have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
So, where do adolescents get their antiretrovirals, and how easy is it for them to get them? Clearly that has to be a huge issue.
It's fairly easy. So antiretroviral treatment is given free of charge at all public health facilities. So
if they have to go to a public health facility and they don't get them from their school, or it takes them time and transportation in order to be able to get there.
Correct, yeah. So accessing these facilities could be a challenge for some. In the Western Cape, it wouldn't be particularly a problem because public transport would be readily available. The issue there is, which is always complicated, is the issue of stigma and discrimination. So what we found is, for instance, that you wouldn't go to the facility. So normally a facility, the nearest public health facility would be 5-10 minutes away from you. However, they would prefer to go to a facility that are not in their community, not in their township. So they would be willing to travel 20 minutes, 30 minutes with public transport to go to a facility just to prevent them from being seen at the facility by people that knows them. So that makes the accessing the treatment problem. So in other words, transport going to another place, that's important. But generally speaking, in theory, there would be a public health facility, a primary health care facility that are quite close to them where they could pick up. There are some interventions that are in place, for instance, what we call a family club, where they are being issued the treatment for 2 months at a time. So they come, so in other words, they have to only come every 2 months. And with a family club, they can, any designated family member can actually come and collect on behalf of the child. So in other words, you don't have to miss school to come and pick up your medication. It's not widespread, it's not in all facilities, but getting a day off once every 2 months, I don't think that's not too much of a challenge, normally speaking. In other facilities, they have what we call youth clubs, So in other words, they would be collecting medication with people that are in their age bracket. So it makes it a little bit easier for the young one, not sitting with this old person next to them, you know, and they've both got HIV, so it feels a little bit alienating. And thinking about teenagers and adolescents, all the issues that they have, you know. So it just makes it a little bit of a more comfortable environment. So every answer to any question in South Africa is complicated. Complex.
Go ahead.
Are these gay adolescents or heterosexual adolescents?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I'm wondering if he has a breakdown between are these gay adolescents or heterosexual adolescents?
I don't have well, the short answer is they're both. Yeah. The long answer is we don't have the data to exactly determine which proportion would be gay or how many are heterosexual. The general trend in South Africa is heterosexual transmission, but also remembering that adolescents, most of them are perinatally infected. Okay, so the unexplored part of all of this is their sexual and reproductive health needs. So that is becoming increasingly important. You know, start to make Google eyes at the girls and the boys, you know, and deal with that. So that issue, so how you do sexual and reproductive health services in the context of HIV, because normally you say, have a condom because you don't want to have HIV, and HIV is a dreaded disease. Oops, I really got HIV. Does that mean condom is out? Huh?
Yeah.
You know, or whatever. So the messages has not evolved in terms of sexual and reproductive health needs to actually address adolescents that already have HIV. You know, so sometimes, you know, that the health promotion message is doing such a good job, you know, to putting the fear in them, you know. But if you don't get infected with HIV, you know, what do you? Oh.
It changes the dynamics of it. Yes, go ahead.
So the question, my question is, in schools, is HIV prevention taught? Is is comprehensive sex education taught in schools, and at what age levels?
So, in theory, policy, yes, it's taught, and it's taught from primary school level, yeah, throughout. How well is this done? That's so the problem with that is with the teacher, and what is the teacher's views on things. Yeah. So in many instances you have resistance from parents. What ideas are you putting into my child's? Yeah, my little baby didn't even think about sex until you start to talk about this. Yeah. So that is a challenge. So in some instances, you know, depending, parent-teacher associations, you know, those are quite powerful. The school governing boards, they're quite powerful political, can I say, bodies, yeah, in school, and dictating what is the extent of that health promotion, you know, sexual reproductive health, and the messages that are coming through guidance classes and that. So in theory, it's part of the curriculum. And again, it's about who does it say, and about sexual orientation. No, we can't say if the boys can do it with boys. So, yeah.
Makes it quite difficult.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So some studies have shown that people with HIV are more likely to be depressed than those without. So do you have like any ways to give counsel for the HIV positive patients, because that could be one reason for non-adherence to their therapy?
Absolutely. So one other section that's been, I've got currently a PhD student that's going to be looking at that, and looking at the issue of mental health well-being, mental health disorders, and mental health well-being. Why is that? Because just if you go according to DSM, you know, it's hard to diagnose an adolescent with depression. Because they need to go extensive, you know, they have to show symptoms. And then also, how do you know if it's just a down day or that type of thing? So depressive symptoms is very common. It's actually, for adolescents, it's even much more common than other people. So it has been found that a big proportion of people generally, not only adolescents, that are HIV positive, depression is high. The problem with adolescents is hard to diagnose, and you actually need to deal with depressive symptoms rather than this depression as a disorder. And that is not being touched at all. It's about the human resources for health capacity, the amount of people that are able to actually provide those psychological services, therapeutic services in a South African health systems context. It's just too small.
Okay, we'll take one last question. Go ahead.
Have you found any cultural differences in terms of cultural applications to psychosocial behaviors? In 1995, we did a research with the UNFPA in Zimbabwe on that very thing, the adolescent HIV context. Have you found how you can best use cultural traits to teach the youth?
That is our biggest challenge. The reality is South Africa is so diverse. So we have a mixed problem. So the problem with interventions, and particularly psychosocial support interventions, is it needs to be tailored to the people. So I don't even use the word cultural, because everything is cultural. So depending on where you are, if you're looking at Cape Town, you have Xhosa speaking people, you have immigrant populations coming in, we've got, South Africa is very racialized. I don't know if anybody knows that, I'm colored supposedly, what does that mean? It says on the ID, so everything is cultural, and that makes it very, very important to tailor interventions, and that is why when you look, so what we try to do is we work along language. So that tends to be a unifying factor. So in other words, if somebody speaks the same language, we use that as the denominator to kind of reach out to them. And what we try to do is with the intervention agent, we try to match it to the recipients of the intervention. So in other words, so that you can get a feeling for, we've got your initiation rights, you've got your cultural things, and certain things are not allowed to be talked. So I, as a colored person, cannot talk to a Xhosa man about what is manhood. What right do I have? Not even if I'm a woman. Because a woman, I can't say it, I can't talk that. So we need to get a man that has gone through the bush, the initiation, and is a man now to deal with those matters. Yeah. So you need to have it tailored, and you need to be sensitive to where they're at, but also for adolescents, some would have gone through there, or are, so for instance, in one of our groups, for instance, one of the things that came out was the one person was saying, I'm going to go to the bush, in other words, for my initiation rights into manhood at the end of the year, and he's actually quite scared about it. Because it is, the success of the initiation of that ritual will determine whether he's going to be accepted into his culture or not. So that becomes now part of treating with him. So he's going in there feeling different, feeling diseased. I'm HIV. I'm going there. Will I be strong enough? Do you understand what I'm saying? So in other words, it's normally the bush is basically they're left there. They need to survive certain elements, and come out on the other side. So the challenge is real for that person. And you need to have some, so for instance, there was an adherence counselor was supposed to be there, but she was like, but she can't talk about the details of that. So you need to get you need a man who's gone through that to actually help him deal with those fears, anxiety that he has in doing with that. So in South Africa, that's the complexity of the challenges that we sit with.
Well, thank you so much. We show the look, but I feel like it's very, very important for home preparation. So thank you. I would like to take a moment to thank both of our speakers.